I just wanted to start by welcoming everybody. I know that Liz did that very well, but I wanted to reinforce the idea that right now we're in the Project X-ITE co-working space. The X Lab is what we call it. And for those of you students and advisors in the room, this is a place that we encourage students, especially student entrepreneurs, but all students in general, to come work throughout the school year. It's a really cool working environment with lots of interesting students working on projects where we see a lot of serendipitous collisions that can lead to a lot of cool things happening here on campus. So please feel free to come in here and work anytime that you want. The format is set up today for this event, but usually there's working tables and stuff like that. But without further ado, we'll get started. Thank you, Jennifer, for being here.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it. Just to kind of give us all context for what you do, it'd be really great if we could get the overview of what Flapjacked is, and then I think we'll kind of take a step back and see how it came to fruition.
Sure. So Flapjacked is all about foods you love with protein you need. Basically taking everyday items like pancakes, muffins, smoothies, bringing the carbs down, pumping the protein up. So kind of you're giving us some neutral balance on nutrition. We have 20 grams of protein in most of our products except our cookies, but really it's about, making better for you products, sort of allergen free. They're all gluten free ingredients, but taking a better take on things that people enjoy that typically give us a carb crash.
Great. And so what was your experience in industry before you started Flapjacked, or what was the timeline on the beginnings?
So previous to Flapjacked, I was a global design director on major CPG brands with Kimberly-Clark. So Kotex, Poise, Depend brands. So I started out in diapers, so I say it's everywhere from from birth to death down there. That's kind of morbid, but no, I was the lead spear on the U by Kotex relaunch, which was the $7 billion brand for Kimberly-Clark.
Mm-hmm.
So that was fun. But I was traveling a lot. I was in Neenah. I wanted to move out here with my family and decided, I didn't have kids so that other people could raise them. Got really tired of being away from Monday through Friday. My husband was an airline pilot, so, we never saw each other a lot. And we have 5 kids, 2 with special needs, one with autism, severe autism. He's still at 14, can't read or write. And one with epilepsy. And diet was just a huge thing for us, especially for Jace, the one with autism, because he was not growing properly. His speech was impaired. He couldn't really communicate. It was really tough. And he had a sensory issue with foods, but he loved pancakes. So I started taking my husband's protein powder and putting it into the pancake mix and realized, he likes this. And we started to see a difference. But I knew, looking at ingredients, we could do way better. So I started playing around with flours. I am not a food scientist. I'm not a cook. I love to be in the kitchen, but it was just kind of trial and error. It took about 6 to 8 months, and we came up with an idea. And with my background in design and research, I knew that, just researching it, there was absolutely nothing like it on the market. So we tested the idea that we had with 200 friends and family around the country, and realized, we've got an idea here that's plausible and marketable. So that's really how we rooted the start, and it enabled me to just quit my job and start doing something else that kept me home.
Oh, that's very interesting. How did your marketing background and your professional experience prior to launching Flapjacked help you in the experience of starting it, and how did it challenge you? What were the different dynamics there?
Well, it's interesting because I have a design background, which is quite different. I mean, design fits within marketing, but as growing through my career, owning a design studio and then getting into a design director role, working very closely with marketing, you learn a lot more than you would just on your own. Mm-hmm. I would work with agencies, with $1 million budgets, millions of dollars of budgets. So different types of agencies, from e-com to design to advertising, and really was able to take that and use the most expensive part about building a brand, which is design, if you know nothing about design and you go to an agency and you say, hey, make packaging for me, it's very expensive, and most startups don't have budgets for that. So I actually designed the first round of Flapjacked and came up with the idea because I knew how to do it. From packaging suppliers to print, it all came pretty seamless. So we felt lucky to have that aspect. And also building a brand. Managing billion-dollar brands in the past, it was easy for me to transition into what we have passion for, something that we love rather than just a product.
And what were some things that your background didn't necessarily prepare you for? Maybe something that students can learn from your experience when trying to start their own business.
A lot. Business itself can be different from one food company to another, depending on the category. I knew nothing about food, nothing about the category, so it was interesting to come into a field and have to know about FDA, nutrition. I knew some of that from labeling, with Kimberly-Clark, but you really have to dig your heels in, and understand what you know and what you don't. If you can pretend, and muddle through and pretend, and a lot of people get through that way, but my weakness was really business, general finance. I'm a designer. I'm the right brain, left brain. It's quite different for me. Me and numbers, they don't mesh very well, unless I'm in a spreadsheet building, innovation or innovative recipes. That's kind of where my head spins. But there's a lot. We relied a lot on local resources, local food companies. We got joined the Naturally Bolder kind of group where they teach and mold, for food industry questions. They would have, there's all kinds of expos where you go sell your product. They would teach you about what to bring, what not to bring, how to go about paying for it if you need funds. Just being able to talk to other people about what's going on in their lives and how they got from point A to point B. You just have to know what your strengths and weaknesses are.
And besides joining community groups, and obviously you have a background in not only design, but you said research as well. We find that a lot of students have trouble with the initial due diligence of what do I absolutely need to know going into this industry. And so what were some of the techniques that you used to learn those need to knows outside of what we were just explaining?
Trial and error, talking with people, not being afraid to ask questions. That's key. People who sit back and just expect things to happen and they deal with it as it comes on their plate, they don't get very far. The first year was scary for us because we didn't know what was going to happen. I knew about design and marketing. My husband's an airline pilot, and 5 years later, now he's CEO and running a multi-million-dollar brand that we've learned a lot. So struggles are real, but you can't be afraid to live in a shell. If you live in a shell and you don't get out there and ask questions and be bold, you won't get anywhere, quite frankly. So it takes some guts. It takes a lot of grassroots, guerrilla marketing for yourself as well. Get your name known and have conversations.
And so you touched on something there that's really interesting to me with your husband. And if I'm not mistaken, you guys are in business together, correct?
Yep.
How did you manage the working in a professional capacity with your significant other?
We love it. I think you're either made for it or you're not.
Yeah.
So, he's flying on a trip right now, and like, when are you coming home? And we see each other every day and every night. It just works. I really can't answer that because it's a personality. Some people have personality conflicts like that. With our business, we've divided it right down the center, though. He gets the product off the shelf in terms of sales and managing finances, and I get it on the shelf. Or no, I'm sorry, opposite way. That didn't make any sense. From a marketing perspective, I get them off the shelf with the marketing. He puts them on, so he gets into the sales and finance. So our roles are completely divided. So working together makes it very easy because he's talking with retailers and finance guys and paying the bills, and I'm in innovation and working on new product ideas and development and figuring out what our brand persona is and trying to get the right message out to our two different types of consumers.
Mm-hmm.
So it works well.
I wanna tie back to kind of the hecticness of managing the family life and the relationships and all of that, because especially on college campuses, there's this culture around startups that's emerging where students are they're in a grind, or they're always busy, and it's like you have to pack your schedule to the fullest extent in order to be seen as a success. How did you manage kind of the busyness of your family life? You mentioned some of the challenges with your children and the work life of starting a company.
In early stages, it was tough because, well, I had quit my director job, which was a nice salary, and trying to step back and really say, okay, hunker down. What's important to us? Are we really going to pull the meat off the bones and sink our teeth into this, or do we want the cushy lifestyle of two salaries? And we decided, no, we want to put all heads in, dive in head first. That was the struggle because you've got kids coming home from school and mommy, and I'm trying to hunker down and get stuff done, and really it's making sure that you have time to focus. We decided, okay, from 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock, it's kids. If a child comes up to me, I'm going to look her right in the eye, and I'm going to give her full attention. Otherwise, they just see they see us on our phones, on our computers, and they think that's okay. And I don't want them to grow up, going through life, with their heads on their phones. Drives me nuts. It's all about relationships. So making sure that we have that time set aside. But with Dave and I, if we both understand that we've got work to do, then laptops will go up at 9 o'clock. We try not to do it before bed because then your mind's spinning. But it is a hard balance, and I think it's difficult. I've been doing it for years. I've had my own businesses and managed, teams, and it really takes a personal application to make sure your life is organized the way that you need it to be. So organization is key for us.
Mm-hmm. And I want to tie it back to students a little bit as well. And anybody in the audience, please feel free if you have any questions just to shout out. I don't want to be the only one up here driving the conversation. So if anyone has a direction they want to take this, then please feel free. But I want to tie this back to the students too. What can students do during their college experience that will help them prepare for some of the challenges that you've faced in entrepreneurship and starting your own company?
Pay attention. Pay attention to everything. I mean, when I was in college, it was many moons ago, but paying close attention to what people tell you, especially people with experience. Not letting it slide like, it's a college course. I'm going to just, get by. It's really important to pay attention, but also to get out there and make sure that you understand things about what you're really interested in. If it's starting a company, then you really need to talk to people who started companies and ask for different perspectives, because everyone is different. Every category is different. Even if it's within food is so vast. I mean, from beverage to dry goods to refrigerated, those are all completely different segments. If I went into a refrigerated business, I'd have to start from scratch because the avenues are different, even from freight and shipping, and you don't think about those things. But starting a business, you need to know every single aspect. But the biggest thing is knowing your numbers. So understanding how businesses run and where the money goes, that's key. But also sleep and time, managing your time. You have to manage time well. If you're an entrepreneur, time management can be the death of you, or it can be the success of you. Even now, today, after 20 years, 25 years of doing this, I was in Baltimore last week. I just got back from New York last night. You have to maintain some kind of sanity throughout the busyness. Mm-hmm. So sleep helps with that.
That's great. And students that see Flapjacked or your company and whether it's the industry of food, or if you narrow it down into, I'm not well versed in the food industry, so snacks or even protein snacks or things along those lines, what can students do to get involved in the industry and help support innovation in the industry?
That's a good question, because innovation comes from a lot of different areas. So as I see it, and I'm going to go off track a little bit, people think that research or insights have to do with knowing what's happened in the past. And it's really about watching for things that are untapped in the future. For example, when we started the company, we started with pancake mix because we had a need that we needed to fulfill. The need was our autistic child who wasn't growing, who wasn't communicating. We needed protein in his body. That need then fell to, we realized, hey, wait a minute, we've got other markets out here that enjoy our product. It's not just moms with kids that needed more protein on the go, because everybody needs more protein, especially on the go, but athletes, before and after workout. My husband's an Ironman, and we like to be extremely active in our off time, and we needed to figure out how to get more protein. But we were watching our Instagrammers, all of our social media followers, put our pancake mix in a mug and cook it in the microwave because they're lazy, right? That's what we attribute it to, lazy college kids. No. But really, it was about they'd make it their own. They put chocolate chips, but it was convenience. We had created a convenient product, but it wasn't convenient enough. So that's where we came up with Mighty Muffins. But it really wasn't about the research or about, our insight was watching a habit and answering to that habit. So we realized that they need this in a cup format, and they need it to taste great and be quick. So that's where Mighty Muffins were born, and that's our #1 seller. We're sold in over 20,000 doors now, because it's quick and convenient, and it's recyclable, but you just add water, mix it up, put it in the microwave, and you've got a hot, fresh, ooey gooey muffin with 20 grams of protein out the door on your way to school or after your workout, when you don't have time. So again, go back to the time management piece. We created products because our our lives are crazy with 7 people in our family. It's like convenience is huge, as nutrition is. So. But researching, really keeping your eyes open, and I like to say, listening with my eyes, because you have to pay attention, and that's where the real insights come, are through the needs that we need to fill as entrepreneurs. It's not just about, hey, I need another tasty beverage, let's put probiotics in it, or there's a new kombucha, let's add basil seeds to it, which was huge in Expo, the new latest food show, basil seed drinks. But what's the need? It's really paying attention and understanding that what you have to push as a new product or entrepreneur is something real, and it's something sellable, and it's something that fills a need.
Mm-hmm. And so Mighty Muffins were created from observing your Instagram followers. Do you have any other fun stories like that where you're able to identify a need in a fairly non-conventional way?
That was our big moment, our aha moment. I mean, since then we have cookies. I brought cookies and muffins for everybody to take with them. The cookie mix, really, the Lenny and Larry's. I don't know if you guys are familiar with protein cookies. There's Buff Bake, Lenny and Larry's, and they're $100 billion business in nutrition. You'd find it in GNC, Vitamin Shop. It's carbs and crap, and it's not very healthy. But we realized people complained about portion control, because these cookies are huge. They're like this big, and they're 400 calories or whatever, and not a lot of protein. We're like, portion control is huge, but they want them fresh baked. They don't want this hard bar-like thing. So we did come up with a cookie mix. It's the first protein cookie mix on the market that's getting a lot of attention right now, where you have to add eggs and butter and bake it like a regular cookie, but it's 10 grams of protein for 2 cookies, small cookies. And it's, a third less sugar, which it doesn't seem like a huge insight, but moms are going nuts for this stuff, because to make what kid or adult doesn't love cookies, especially fresh baked chocolate chip cookies, Toll House. But you look at the numbers and the opportunity. It's don't quote me on this, but I leave Toll House, it's close to a $500 million outlet for frozen cookie dough, and it's just sugar and deliciousness, right? Well, we did kind of the same thing, but made it better. So just using small insights, and it's a mix. It's still a mix. Anybody could do it, but that was probably our next. It wasn't really an aha moment, but we've decided muffins are going to be our mainstay, and that's where we're going to focus, is single serve, because retailers are demanding single serve right now. But as an entrepreneur and thinking about that, it's easier to manage a single cup because it can be in and out. It's not as expensive. So even thinking about cost, when you have a pancake or a chocolate chip bag, you have to think about the packaging you have to purchase, what goes in, the ingredients, how many you have to buy. I mean, there's a lot of process into launching a product. With our muffins, they're all digitally printed, so we could print off as many as we want and fill them, and have easy tests. So it's kind of an easy thing for us to in and out.
And so you've been talking a lot about the product development piece of it, and I'd really like to explore the behind the scenes of learning the manufacturing process, whether it's the packaging or the product, the food product itself. Working with different vendors and retailers, we can take this one step at a time, but it's really intriguing that you started from scratch and had to learn all about this, and now that you say you're digitally printing some of these things, which appears to me to be a pretty advanced technique for someone who started from scratch.
Yeah, so a lot of trial and error. When you start a company and you know nothing about packaging, we started out buying pouches. This is an interesting story. We started out literally mixing in our garage, and because cottage laws, and you guys will get into that if you get into a food company, you can make something in your kitchen as long as it's clean and sell it online up to $50,000 a year or something like that, and it's covered by Colorado cottage laws. Above that, you have to be in a clean facility. So we went from mixing it. We bought this huge mixer. It was a drum roller that went sideways, and we got pictures of our kids rolling this thing. But we hand packed all of our product initially. We bought bags offline that were probably 50 cents a piece. Doesn't seem like a lot, but when you tally all the money that goes into this little bag, it got expensive. But in order to purchase packaging, the cheapest way to do it was to go to China. You have to print plates, which are $300 a color. You have to wait for 12 weeks to get this thing overseas. It took from 50 cents down to, let's say, 11 cents. So it was a huge cost savings. So while we're waiting on our packaging, we're filling bags, but we had to rent a commercial kitchen and actually make the product in a manufacturing style place that we rented out by the hour and made it on our own. They showed us how to use auger fillers and date stamp machine and actually mix our product, fill our product. The first time we filled a pallet with our product, it took us 13 hours. My hands were raw. My feet were killing me. It's like you're standing there just filling bags. But we had to know the process. And then we went through our first Whole Foods audit and flew in, with flying colors past it, which we were so happy about. But we're like, okay, I'm done with this. We had to move to co-packers and have actually somebody make the product. The things that they don't tell you in school or in any class is that you have to have the money to do that. They will not release the product unless you give them the money for the run. So the zeros kept getting bigger, on the checks, and that's when you really have to hunker down. When they call it bootstrapping, it's bootstrapping. I sold a car for that packaging. We moved here from Wisconsin, and I had a Lexus convertible. I worked so hard for that damn thing, and I mean years, and I was so proud, and we needed $20,000 to buy packaging, and I sold my car. So that's how bad, it got. And, down to the point where we're like, okay, how much money do we have left over for groceries this month? And we have 5 kids, which is really scary. But we decided to take that step, and we scraped the money together. Dave picked up a few jobs flying airplanes. We were able to make it, save enough money to pay our co-packer, and that was the first step. And ever since then, it's just been sweating bullets, with every month. But now we're at the point where we're millions of dollars in terms of revenue, and it's harder to manage because now we have people, but easier financially because we've planned right.
Yeah.
Margins, cutting costs, and that kind of thing. But making your own product is critical. Knowing the process, because if you don't know the process, you can't go to co-packers and say, hey, something's wrong here, you know.
And so on the opposite side of manufacturing, what was it like dealing with vendors and suppliers, or getting it into retail space? Do you have any stories around that?
I do. Well, a big mistake that we made with packaging, going back just real quick, is nobody told us about UPCs and where they needed to come from. And apparently there's...
And what's a UPC?
The SKU. So like the scannable unit that you take and they put in the grocery store and they scan your product. The number one biggest thing that you need to know about is UPCs. Because if you don't buy it from a company called GS1, then you have to relabel everything, because the big stores like Kroger and Walmart will not accept your SKU number, which we had printed on bags and had to relabel with many glass bottles of wine at the coffee table, thousands and thousands of bags. So that was mistake number one. But what was your question? I'm sorry.
So you told a great story on packaging,
Yes.
but then I wanted to
the
flip
retailers.
to the
I'm
other
sorry.
side.
Yes, I was going to go to retail.
Retailers, vendors, suppliers.
So our first sale, we went to this Naturally Boulder thing and found out who the buyer was for our category in pancake mix. King Super, right? Which is Kroger. And we got a meeting, and we were really nervous. We showed up in like suits and heels and, you know, like really, really nervous, and we were just ready to, you know, present our product. And lo and behold, we walk into this room, and it's a boardroom full of 25 buyers. I'm like, okay, I have no idea who all these people are, but we went ahead with our pitch, and they nailed us with all kinds of questions. Well, why can't you do pumpkin? Why are you doing buttermilk? And, you know, they really loved it though. So it was our first experience. We felt like we got shot down, and we got a call the next day, and hey, we'd like to put you in 76 stores. We're like, awesome, great. That was our first experience, which was really nerve-wracking because we have no idea. That turned into our product sold so well in the natural set that Kroger National it was time to pitch them, and they decided, you know what, their numbers are so good here, we're going to push them national. So it just led into that relationship kind of seamlessly. We didn't have to sell it. We got really lucky that way. Same with REI. REI was the first national chain that we had. We thought it was great for backpackers and people, you know, people into that outdoorsy scene. So they were the first to take it nationally. So it just kind of grew. You know, you find out who the buyers are. The toughest part is navigating what a broker is, what a distributor does, what a salesperson does. And I know that seems weird, but brokers also sell. So really understanding what the process is from taking your product to getting it on shelf, because there are a lot of steps. You have to sell it into the retailer, then back it up, find a broker to fill out all the paperwork, get it into a distributor that will distribute it to all of the stores, and then pricing and marketing and figuring out what all of your promos are. So those are things that we've learned over the course of years, and we're still trying to understand it all. But you definitely have to have a broker to manage all of the paperwork, otherwise you just get lost. What's a case pack? What's a cube? You have to know like every single level of, you think it's just about the product, right? Here's this little widget and it tastes great, let's go sell it. Well, what kind of case does it go on? How does it fit on a pallet? How do they ship it in? The logistics of it, which we know nothing about, that was probably the toughest part to learn. But you know, meeting people, and people are pretty nice. They help you through it, and you learn fast. You also fail fast. That's kind of our motto. You know, if I fail, I just pick up the pieces and I move on and learn from it. Like the UPC thing that took us months to relabel and a lot of cases of wine.
That's great. And so through this whole process of coming up with the product idea to manufacturing it to get it on the shelves, it seems like it was just kind of natural growth the way that you're kind of framing it up now. Is that true, or how did you approach the growth process?
Well, you have to find the retailers, and in order to do that, you have to go to some of these food shows. There's one called Expo West, which is the largest natural food show in the country. There's 3,500 vendors. Actually, I think it's close to 6,000 vendors. It's out in Anaheim. We just came back last week from Expo East, which is in Baltimore, so other side of the country, but half the size. That's where the buyers go to see new products. So but it's expensive. So we walked that show one year, met a few people in the pancake business, became friends with them, and really just talked to entrepreneurs at that show to try to get information. Is it worth it to come here? And the advice they told us, well, you have to be in a distributor, otherwise the buyers walk around and they can't buy your product. So a distributor is the one that you ship all your product to, and they will send it out to hundreds of stores. UNFI is one big one. There's KeHE is another one. And if you're not in those two distributors, you might as well not spend the 20 grand to come to the show, because a lot of these mom and pop stores aren't big enough to pull you in, unless they're Kroger or Target or Walmart. So we decided on year 2 that we'd go ahead and spend the money and get a booth and represent ourselves. We weren't in UNFI yet or KeHE, but luckily we found a few big buyers that had enough stores to be able to pull us into that distributor. And then once you're in those distributors, then all retailers can find you, because most of them will buy their product directly from a distributor, unless it's a company like Kroger who has their own distributor where we just ship direct. So but that costs money. Distributors charge a 40% or up to a 40% fee, and then they have to sell it to the retailer. So when you have to go through a distributor, your prices are a lot higher, and they have to take that into consideration too. What is the maximum price a consumer is willing to pay for your product? Ultimately, we want it to be $2.99 for a muffin, but some people have it at like $4.99, which is crazy. So, but it's a long process, but it all has to do with that relationship of the broker, the distributor, the retailer.
Mm-hmm. And so the Y Combinators or the Techstars of the world, they tend to preach this idea of do things that don't scale. So in this case, I would think that would be an example like selling a single muffin door to door or something like that. But it doesn't seem like that's the route that you took.
I've never heard that for food.
Really?
No.
Really? So that's
no,
just a
scale
food.
Is important. I mean, some people, a lot of investors will tell us, go deep before you go wide, which means if you're in Whole Foods, you have to completely concentrate on Whole Foods. You sample every week. You really get that relationship booming. You get all of the, your consumers kind of feeding on that, and then you start to spread out to other regions, and then you do the same thing there. We took the opposite, because we knew there was a need, and we knew that if we didn't get there first, that competitors would, and there are competitors creeping up on us too. We decided to take the opposite route and go wide, and then start to go deep, running sales, and it's worked for us. It's worked really well, but I think it depends on the product.
Mm-hmm. And in the food industry, how do you go wide? Many
stores in many different areas. Part of the problem is it's the chicken and the egg, right? Do you market? What about PR? It's for marketing perspective, it gets really expensive to market to wider audiences, but our e-commerce business is a third of our business, and we do really well. So it not only gets the word out when we run Facebook ads or Instagram ads or go heavy after our social media, they also find it in stores. Everybody has to buy groceries, so they ultimately end up in a store, whether they are going to fill up their cart or just buy a few here and there. For us, it's getting the word out and brand recognition. We'll go to like a Fit Expo, and they have them in LA, they have them in Chicago, where It's mostly bodybuilding, CrossFit. We'll pitch a tent or pitch a booth and sample products, little tiny samples so you can taste it, and then sell products. But we'll feed 90,000 people in samples, and that is a lot of brand recognition. By year 3, people like, oh, you didn't bring muffins this year, and they're pissed off because that was their favorite product. But you realize once you do that over and over, that brand recognition sticks. So for us, it's bigger events like that rather than in-store sampling. It costs a lot of money to stand at one Whole Foods, maybe $150 a sampling round for 3 hours, but you're only sampling to like 20 people. Where we can hit an event like Rock and Roll Marathon and feed thousands and get that brand recognition out there.
Yeah. And so you talk about, I mentioned the do things that don't scale that these accelerators preach for other industries, and I'm curious if you know of any other components of the food industry that don't necessarily parallel other industries in a similar way. What are the differences between working in food versus working in tech or other industries?
I hear tech's quite different. I've always been CPG, so I've always been in the consumer goods side of things, which seems to parallel itself. There's always pricing rationales and shipping issues, and I honestly don't see a big difference from the fields that I've been in. I don't know much about tech, like I said, but e-commerce even has scaled that way for us. We sell to Amazon and Vendor Central and Seller Central. A lot of people ask us why. It's because we keep them kind of on that parallel to keep our price down, but it's always in scale. The difference is that a lot of investors, and I mentioned that a few times because we're going after our first round of funding, investors will tell us, well, the question is, do you manufacture yourself or do you co-pack? None of them want to invest in a company that has their own manufacturing because it's not scalable, and they can't seed it around the country. So we manufacture in California right now. We're looking to expand to East Coast or maybe the South, but if we were to manufacture ourselves, we couldn't afford to do that. Now we can kind of piecemeal. So companies, especially for acquisition, look for something that's mobile and can move, but in mass. It has to be, it has to make sense financially.
Yeah. And you mentioned in California, you're trying to go to the East Coast. What geographical regions are you in? Because you sell to national retailers, so you are everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. And how has the Denver, Boulder, Colorado community played a role in that? Because you're located here, and so there must be something there.
Honestly, we started manufacturing here, and the co-packers that are available are not big enough for us in the capacity that we needed, and they weren't clean enough. So we decided, we found one in California, but we do shipping to 25 countries. So being at the port is important. We also have major distributors on the West Coast that distribute to, let's say Walmart or HEB. So they have a lot of hubs where they just transfer products. So our particular co-packer ships that for free. So for us, there's a lot of cost savings. It seems like it'd be crazy to go from one side of the country to the other, but it makes sense because all of our consolidators and our distributors are on that coast.
Gotcha. And so you also mentioned in passing that you're preparing for a fundraising round. How's that process going, and what are some of the challenges that you're encountering as you're going through that?
We're about to start, so I don't know. We have been 4.5 years self-funded, so it's 100% owned by my husband and I. We did a friends and family round early, but have not converted. So that is a process too, is really understanding the financing piece behind funding your business. And I would say that is the most important catch-all, and I keep going back to numbers, know your numbers. because there can be a lot of underwritten laws and things in contracts that you don't understand, so lawyers are very important also. But no, we're just starting that. We're going to pitch it November, so we don't know yet.
Okay. And do you have any goals established for this fundraising round, or how are you planning for it? What does that process look like?
It's more about putting gas on the fire so we can continue to fund our growth. So for example, you get Walmart. We had our muffins in Walmart, about 800 stores 3 months ago, and our numbers have climbed 2.7% to 3.3% every week, which is phenomenal for a product like that. They want to move us over from where bars and shakes are in the HABA aisle over to baking, and double our SKU count and increase, more SKUs, put cookies on, but they have a net 90 payout. So that means we have to pay for the product, ship it, and then sit there and twiddle our thumbs and wait 90 days for payment. That gets tight. So that's what fundraising is going to help us do, is manage capital so that we can actually sell in to bigger stores. You think that, great, more stores means more money. Well, it does, but you have to be able to fund that. So when I say put put gas on the fire, it's not only to get you to the next stage, because if they put it in 4,000 stores, it would shut us down. Mm-hmm. Literally, we couldn't afford to pay our employees, and it's great you get into 4,000 doors, but when you don't get paid for 3 months on that, it gets tight. So, when people go after fundraising, that's what it's for. It's for keeping the doors open, continuing to fuel the capital, and then also new product innovation. What's next in the pipeline.
And so, is there the demand in the market to expand now without the or previous to the fundraising, and you just can't meet that demand?
We're going after it. It's kind of simultaneous. So we've planned it. We've been holding off as long as we can, and if you can, hold off as long as you can, because early money is expensive money. That's what you'll learn, and that's a keynote, is that the earliest people get in, the less you have at the end, which sometimes it's good. Justin's Nut Butters, for example. You guys all know who Justin's is? Okay. I can't really speak to the numbers there, but he didn't have a ton when he left, because he started early and he went through round after round after round. And when you sell for $240 million and you look at the piece of the pie at the end, you've built a great business. But in terms of a founder's role, you just have to be really careful on what you give away.
Mm-hmm. And so, does that translate at all when to co-founding a company, and when splitting equity or forming teams, or paying early employees with stock incentives, or what kind of impact does that have?
Depends on who it is. We have done that with a couple of people as an incentive. We're a family business. We hired, Dave's brother, my brother, so we have some family members in there, which makes it a little tricky. But you also want to save a pool for employee expansion later on. Your company isn't worth anything until somebody will give you something for it. So, when you go through your Series A or your first round of funding, you have to be prepared to put a value on your company. And that's a very difficult thing to do. Because every investor looks at it differently. When you talk about gross versus net on numbers, nobody looks at gross. It doesn't matter. It's an inflated number. It's whatever price that it's the net. You have to be ready to just get split open and let everybody look up the skirt, because it's a rough process. Mm-hmm. It's a rough process.
And is this is the end goal of whether it's being acquired or any type of exit event, has that been considered from the beginning, or when did that planning and consideration start to get implemented into conversations?
Recently, and we're in our 40s, so we don't have the energy that young kids have to really go after it. And we've got kids to think about, activities to go to, and we've got other priorities in our life. But there is a time where you just get tired. Honestly, I took the summer off because my kids were off, and I had hit a wall of, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. working 60, 70 hours a week, and that has been for the last 4.5 years. It takes a toll on you. So I just needed to step back, take a break, and sometimes that's really important, is to realize what your limits are. Whether it's a weekend break or a day break or just a few hours, you have to take time for yourself. But no, we started with an end goal in mind, and we work backwards. It's like, okay, let's say we want to, and I'm just hypothetically, if I want to sell for 100 million, we need to get funding at this stage and this stage, and once you have your forecast and you can kind of figure out how much you're going to sell the next year, and you really have to have a good year under your belt before you can even forecast, because you have no clue. You have no clue how many are new doors or velocity. If the velocity is going up, the important thing is that people continue to buy your product, and they buy it regularly, and they continue to buy it. So velocity is important to go up, and it's really difficult to plan in the first year. But after year 2, the light kind of starts to shine, and you start to see, okay, so if I add retailer X, this is what's going to happen to my numbers, and start to plan for that. But we always start with the goal and the end goal in mind, because that's what investors want. They want to say, okay, with this round, is it a 3-year exit? Is it a 5-year exit? Are we going to raise again? What's the plan? And you really have to have that planned out. And this is completely new to us, so we're learning as we go.
Understood. And so you mentioned earlier that you hit a wall and took the summer off, and that's been a big topic of the Brad Felds of the world is mental fitness for entrepreneurs, and making sure that everybody is staying in a good mental place. How did you manage those challenges?
Yeah, well, and Brad went through some mental downs too. It's like all of us do. Realizing that it's happening. Our business was in a place where I'm not working on any new projects, or wasn't, prior to summer. We had vacations scheduled. We had, summer's kind of light for us, but there's also a lot of selling shows where we have to go and, represent our company. But none of that required me. So, we've taken turns kind of just stepping out of the picture a little bit and taking breaks. It's harder for Dave too, because he's acting CEO right now. And every aspect of the business requires, an answer from him on a daily basis. Where for me, on the marketing side, I hired a marketing director. We have an e-commerce, Amazon dedicated team. I have people that can manage the business for me. I checked in. It wasn't that I didn't work all summer. I did. I checked in, but I wasn't physically there every day. But it's just recognizing it and being able to say, okay, if I continue, it's not going to be good.
On the personal side of things, again, now that we're there, I'm curious. We've asked past guests, how have you navigated your biggest flaw when starting and growing this business?
Personal flaws?
Whether it's personal or professional flaws, many guests have recognized that. I had to recognize when I was building this company that I'm very good at this and not good at this, and this is how I managed that when I was either a one-man show or growing the company or doing things in a certain way. We
recognized it early, and that's how the division between what Dave does and what I do it's been so nice and seamless, because we recognized it early. But I was brought up in executive CPG and taught that under leaderships, working with CEOs and VPs of billion-dollar brands. You're taught early to learn what your capabilities are and hire for those voids. So for me, I do that in everything that I do. Okay, if I can't do this, I need to find somebody that can help me do this. And I think that's what makes an entrepreneur really valuable in their own role, is to understand what they can and can't do. Dave and I realized that we can build this up to a certain point, and then we're going to need a CEO, one that has ran a food company before. Dave's doing a fantastic job, and he's the smartest man I've ever met. But we both realized that we're not trained. We don't have the experience to run a successful food company. So in our best interest, I would hire a VP of marketing, and we would hire a VP of sales, and we would replace him as a CEO, step back as a founder's role, and let that company continue to grow. and that's what's going to make it successful.
Wow,
Because I know my weaknesses, but I know that that's not what I want to do. I'd love to. I want to sit there and be part of the growth, but I also know that I don't have the mental capacity to actually do it.
Yeah. And so this has been fantastic. But in the interest of time, just kind of a closing question of do you have any words of wisdom or parting advice for students in the audience? And
Educate yourself as much as you can. Be a sponge, basically. That's what we do. We read, and read more about what your interests are. And if you're bored by it, it's not what you want to do. You just got to completely soak yourself in it and learn from it. And even if you're not comfortable asking people for advice or asking them for help, ask. Always ask.
Great. Thank you for coming today.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
No
Give a
problem.
little hand clap.